Banks, airlines, and even government agencies around the world were crippled thanks to a company called CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike provides cybersecurity measures to Windows computers, which those major institutions all use. But today, its products malfunction thanks to an incredible software issue, or at least that is what the company says. But right wingers like Elon Musk have already jumped at the opportunity to blame the malfunction on, of all things, DEI program. Today, Musk responded to a post that CrowdStrike published 2 years ago. Here's the post. It says, "We were proud to be a gold partner of Bright Network's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging panel. Our team shared their career journeys and tips on how we are creating an equitable and inclusive workplace for all." And Musk said this in response. He said, "Not very bright right now, is it?" So clever. Other conservatives jumped on this bandwagon too. In response to a DEI post featuring a girl wearing a hijab, Christopher Rufo said, "Went all in on DEI, massive internet outage. I'm not assigning causation in this particular instance, but it is an iron law of institutions that DEI leads directly to incompetence, corruption, discrimination, and fraud."
Women are getting blamed for Trump's because DEI? Huh? By now, we all know what happened at the Trump rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday. It's a horrific moment in recent American history that has no place in our politics. But what's so striking is that literally minutes after it occurred, rather than temper their rhetoric or place responsibility for where it squarely belongs, the many MAGA social media users began blaming the entire incident on the fact that there are more women in the Secret Service than there used to be. Elon Musk even got in on it by attacking the head of the agency, who happens to be a woman. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still a lot we don't know about this event and any alleged security lapses that happened, and both parties are entitled to answers from the Secret Service. But immediately going mask off and cherry-picking one or two images to pin blame on women agents who were risking their lives in the fog of the moment, no different than any of their other colleagues, that's just giving the game away, fellas. Now, at the same time, that MAGA conservatives taking awful tragedies and immediately politicizing them to badmouth DEI is nothing new. Remember the Baltimore Bridge collapse? Well, what's actually interesting here is it's one of the most prominent times that they're turning their vitriol to white women at the center of the story, instead of people of color.
6 people are presumed dead after a cargo ship named Dolly crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore this week. There are still many unanswered questions about what led to this horrific incident, but regulatory filings might provide some hints. Turns out that the company that chartered the ship was recently sanctioned by federal investigators for muzzling workers who voiced safety concerns. In fact, just 8 months prior to the horrific crash, the Labor Department sanctioned shipping conglomerate Maersk, or Maersk Line Limited, for firing an employee who reported unsafe working conditions on a Maersk-operated boat. The worker, who was a chief mate and relief captain on the Maersk-operated Safmarine Mafadi, reported basically unrepaired leaks, unpermitted alcohol consumption on board, inoperable lifeboats, faulty emergency fire suppression equipment, and other issues. And those are big issues. The Labor Department found that Maersk had a policy that requires employees to first report their concerns to the company prior to reporting it to the Coast Guard or other authorities. Federal regulators at the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also known as OSHA, called the policy repugnant and a reprehensible and an egregious violation of the rights of employees, which chilled them from contacting the Coast Guard or other authorities without contacting the company first. And guess what? OSHA was right in their analysis, since the company's policy violated the Seaman's Protection Act, which protects maritime workers who report violations to the Coast Guard from company retaliation. The legislation was amended in 2010 to add protections for employees who refuse to perform certain duties due to fears of personal injury. And yes, I said seaman and duty in the same sentence. Pretty amazing. When the Labor Department concluded their investigation into Maersk, they found that the censorious policy was approved by the company's executives. Maersk's vice president of labor relations admits that this reporting policy requires seamen to report safety concerns to the company and allow it time to abate the conditions before reporting to the Coast Guard or other regulatory agencies, Labor Department investigators said in their report. Regulators also ordered the company to reinstate the employee and pay over $700,000 in damages and back wages. I want to do that guy's job. How do we do that guy's job? Oh, that sounds pretty good. They also demanded that Maersk revise its policy to allow seamen to contact the Coast Guard about safety concerns before notifying the company. Maersk is also in the middle of a legal battle with International Longshoremen's Association, which is a labor union representing 65,000 maritime workers. APM Terminals, a division of Maersk, sued the union, claiming employees at its Mobile, Alabama port were engaging in an illegal strike. Documents filed by the union in March allege that the company illegally suspended 6 workers for raising a concern about a safety issue at the job site. Look, this new reporting gives us some insight into the workplace culture at Maersk, which doesn't seem conducive to safe shipping operations, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there were known safety vulnerabilities aboard Dolly. Now that the black box, or what's the equivalent of the black box, has been recovered, we should await a full investigation into what really transpired. The Washington Post did report today that there was an issue discovered on the same cargo ship last year in June. Inspectors at the port of San Antonio, Chile, discovered a problem categorized as relating to propulsion and auxiliary machinery, according to the Tokyo MOU, an intergovernmental shipping regulator in the Asia-Pacific region. Yeah, sounds like this whole DEI argument is just meant to shift the conversation away from possible safety regulations, which corporate donors are known to lobby hard against. To nobody's surprise, Van Drew isn't the only one who's making this insane argument that DEI is to blame. And look, honestly, there are some elements of DEI that I think are not good and I've been critical of. This story is not a good example of that.
Greetings, good people. Thank you for stopping by for another edition of the Independent Mail. Okay, you saw the title, you saw the thumbnail. If you're still here, you sat through the opening clips. DEI must DIE. Okay, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on this. We're going to play a couple of more clips, and then I'm going to wrap it up by telling you exactly the reasons why DEI has to go, much like the previous iteration of affirmative action. And I'm going to also tell you what parties are to blame. Hint, hint, it's both. It's in the title. But let's go ahead and get off to the next 2 clips I want to play just to establish what it is that we're dealing with. First clip is going to be former President Trump, 45. And the next clip is going to be from the great O'Shea Duke Jackson. And again, these 2 clips are to help establish what it is we're dealing with when we're talking about things, programs, policies like DEI and affirmative action. So first, let's check out the clip from President Trump. It actually comes from the debate from a couple of weeks ago. Let's check it out.
That's being thrown out the window. He calls inflation. As sure as you're sitting there, the fact is that his big kill on the black people is the millions of people that he's allowed to come in through the border. They're taking black jobs now, and it could be 18, it could be 19, and even 20 million people. They're taking black jobs, and they're taking Hispanic jobs, and you haven't seen it yet, but you're going to see something that's going to be the worst in our history.
Okay. All right. I did not play that for the black jobs clip, the soundbite per se. I do think it's funny and the reactions that everybody had over it, but that's not why I played it. Before I get into that, let's go to the next clip. It's about 2 more minutes. O'Shea Duke Jackson. I want you to pay attention to this because, again, much like President Trump and his comment with the black jobs, I want you to check out O'Shea Duke Jackson. This is about a 3-year-old video when the Ukraine-Russia war first started. So let's check that out.
Situation with African immigrants who are stuck in Ukraine is very interesting to me. You know, I lived in Poland, still have a residence there. I've been to Lviv, Ukraine. I have vlogs on my channel of me going there. I love the city of Lviv. And I've met many Nigerians there, many Africans there. Many come to study medicine, pharmacy, and things like that. It's typically cheaper, and they're able to go back to Ghana, Nigeria, and practice. But many people go there because they can't afford maybe to go to, let's say, London or the EU. So they go and they study there in Ukraine. We all know what's going on with the war. And then going into Poland, which is the next nearest country, headed westward. The immigrants who are in line to get transported are being pushed to the back. All right. There are many videos showing that transpiring, and the borders of the people are saying Ukrainians first, and preventing them to transfer into nearby countries. And there are even some accounts of African men pushing African women into the trains if they can't get in. Because they say, okay, we're going to take women and children. So they're pushing the black women to go in there and be transported and force them to take them. Some of these people have been pushed to the back of the line. All right. But I want to talk about the Nigerian students who have arrived, or African students who have arrived in the Lublin area, some parts of Krakow, things like that. Now, I've talked to one of my buddies who works with the Nigerian embassy, and many people have been, trying to contact the nearby embassies for help. And allegedly, from what he's told me, I know he's telling the truth. The Nigerian embassy said, listen, these students are here. You guys are on your own. We can't help you or give you any assistance. So literally, people have been raising money to transport people. Let's say, for example, if you're coming from Lviv and you want to go into Warsaw, you might stop in Lublin, Poland, but then you may need transport all the way to Warsaw where you can get accommodation, where you can get housing right now. And I read one comment, which is really going to sum it all up. The guy said, I don't blame Ukrainian soldiers for keeping their people first. Okay. I don't blame that. He says, I blame African leaders. And see, that's what the issue is. I think here we're expecting equality. Of course, they're going to push the blacks to the back. Okay. They're fighting for their country, for their people. They're going to take their people first. Okay. That's normal.
Okay. That's normal.
All right. So you saw the two clips, President Trump, O'Shea Duke Jackson. O'Shea's clip, you saw at the end, had the repetition. That's normal. That's normal. What is normal? I played the 45 clip, former President Trump, and O'Shea's for a reason. Oftentimes we forget what it is we're dealing with when we talk about things like DEI and affirmative action. We look at them, we look at jobs, we look at college admissions, and then that's what we associate those things with. What a job is, what an education is, it's a resource. Those things are valuable resources that all of us as citizens use. Employment and education, we use these things to provide for ourselves, to provide for our families, to survive. Education and jobs are survival resources. They're very valuable. Okay, so regardless of if some of us got triggered with the term of black jobs and Hispanic jobs or whatever, that's not the point that I was making. The reason I used that clip from 45 is because he was talking about black resources or Hispanic resources. And then what does O'Shea show us? Completely separate from what we're dealing with here in the US, which is why I used it as an example. Getting the hell out of Dodge in 2021 out of Ukraine became a valuable resource. It is human nature that when we divvy out resources, we tend to divvy them out and prefer or give preferences to people that we have connections to. It's not always a racial connection. It can be that I went to this guy's church. This guy played golf with my dad. My dad and this dude were in the same fraternity. You and I are in the same fraternity. There are all kinds of connections that go into play when we start divvying out resources. All right. Play one more clip. It's only about 2 minutes. It's from the Pat McAfee show. Okay. I use this clip because this is a valuable resource that a lot of us objectively looked at when we saw maybe some favoritism, some nepotism, or whatever involved. But of course, we're not going to get in a big tissy over it because 99% of us will never have the physical acumen or the athletic physical ability to even worry about having to compete for one of these resources. But this is still a good example of what we're talking about with resources and how sometimes resources can be divvied out based on connection more than qualification or merit. So let's check it out with Pat McAfee right quick. Like I say, this ain't gonna be long. I'm not gonna talk a lot. We're gonna let the clips do the talking. All right, Pat, let us know what's up.
Cool thing. Congrats to both of them. It's always been a dream, allegedly, from LeBron James whenever he was talking to play alongside one of his kids. And obviously, Bronny, the oldest, would have been the one if it was ever to make it happen. The fact that he's still playing basketball at the level in which he is still playing basketball, and that child right there is now going to be on the same team as him, that is a cool thing to happen no matter how you feel about the draft pick. And I appreciate the amount of response and reaction to a second-round draft pick in the NBA draft, because I don't know if anybody gets picked in the second round of the NBA that he's like heralded as a game changer. I mean, there's a chance Connor Campbell could have got drafted to the Los Angeles Lakers as a publicity stunt. People would have been like, that's smart. Like, yeah, that's all been like, yeah, it's actually a fun way to utilize second round draft, because in the end, they're trading 2031 draft picks right now. The second round doesn't even matter. The fact that Bronny got drafted got some people very pissed off. Nepotism, the power that LeBron James has. Giannis's brother plays in the NBA right now. I don't even know if he knows what a bucket is. Now, he's a great guy, gives great effort. Like, this is something that happens in the real world. And if anybody in this particular NBA would deserve some sort of favor, I think it would be LeBron James, who's basically carried the league on his back since he's 17 years old in this entire thing, alongside others, obviously, but through it all. So people being like, if his name wasn't Bronny James and it was Jack Smith, you think this would happen? No. Yeah. It's fucking LeBron James's kid. We're going to assume that he has some sort of insider intel or potentially fast track to becoming a much better player in the NBA. He's been training with his uncles who have been NBA players for his entire life. He's seen how somebody takes care of their body to be an NBA player for his entire life, the commitment, the dedication, all that. So obviously, if your dad is going to be considered one of the greatest players of all time and you play the same damn sport, I assume you're going to be given a little bit more favor over other kids. That sucks, but it's reality. It happens in every business. You ever seen people talking into microphones on TV or sports or anything else? What was their fodder? What was their fodder's fodder? Yeah. What was their mother's fodder? It was probably in the same exact business, and they just so happened to meet everybody that is in the business as decision makers, so they had a head start. Bronny had a head start. That's reality. That's not his fault, but it's also the reality of everything. And if anybody has earned it, I would say it's LeBron James, especially in the NBA. So good luck to both of them.
Okay. So you saw, obviously, Mr. McAfee was discussing the hype or a lot of the backlash a little bit, with the Lakers picking Bronny in the second round. And, what I'm saying, despite averaging like 5 points, what I'm saying, at USC, despite having the cardiac arrest issues, despite being a little bit all of these despites, second round, like a $7.8 million contract. Last year's second round 55th pick had like a $200,000 contract. So anyway, that's what has a lot of people, as he was saying, that was in a tissy. But my point was, this was something that most of us are removed from. We don't have to worry about competing for National Basketball Association positions. So we look at it, we make a comment about it, like, yeah, that's some nepotism, yeah, that's some favoritism, but we don't really sweat it that much because it doesn't affect us. And if there was a situation where a lot of all-time Hall of Famers played all the way into their 40s to where their children were coming around, and this was happening like more often, the NBA would probably have to institute some kind of policy to adjust for that. That's what brings me to, again, these resources of employment and education, and wrapping this whole thing up as why The current iteration of DEI has to die, just like affirmative action did. It was a well-meaning policy by the Democrats, much like welfare is or government assistance is, but they've gone awry and they've caused a lot of negative things. And this is what I mean. Having a situation where employers or post-secondary education institutions have a percentage or a quota of minorities, whether it be female or people of color or whatever, that they A, look at, or B, hire and admit. Basically, like you're saying, relative to their population in the country, so a 10 or to 13% clip. Having people have a percentage of having institutions have a percentage of those applicants looked at and or hired and admitted isn't an issue on its face, especially when you know what you're trying to combat. You're trying to combat human nature. Again, I'm not saying that all nepotism and favoritism is nefarious or is racially motivated. Oftentimes it's not. They're just connections. But the point is, programs and policies like affirmative action and DEI were put into place to help combat that. Because let's be real and let's be clear. In these instances, the most qualified people are not always picked. And we know that in the real world. All of us have worked in offices where we want to know why he or she is even in here. All of us have. And they come across both sexes and they come across all spectrum of the racial background. Okay, but now, because, and this is the part of the fault of the Democrats, which is usually what happens with them when they mean well, overreach. They overreach sometimes. And you're like, what are you talking about? What was overreached? Well, the overreach in this particular instance was adjusting, and this wasn't across the board. This was certain institutions, certain jobs, certain places that decided to do this. Adjusting criteria. Can adjust criteria. Can adjust testing criteria. You can adjust educational criteria in an effort to comply to an affirmative action policy or a DEI policy. The reason I say this is because as soon as you do that, and you're like, what do you mean you can't adjust the certain institutions lower maybe test score requirements or something like that for admissions in order to comply with like certain affirmative action programs and things of that nature. Even like in the military or say public service, some requirements are different for males and females. By making requirements and qualifications different, the door was opened for Republicans to vilify anything that had to do with any one of those two programs, affirmative action or DEI, because they were able to keep harping on the point that these jobs, resources, these degrees, resources, should go to the most qualified person. And DEI and affirmative action automatically means these people aren't qualified. Why? Because they can cite certain instances where standards were altered. And on the flip side, so now what has happened is, and this is the reason why it has to die, because the Republicans have successfully vilified the term and made it so widespread that now no one that is a female, no one that is a person of color can have any accomplishment that was not given to them. They weren't a DEI admission. They weren't a DEI hire. If mistakes are made, if I can find anywhere in your company's profile where you say you support DEI or DEI programs or DEI policies, we're now going to blame those mistakes on DEI. Boeing is a dumpster fire right now. Go look at the board. E. Is that DEI? Are Republicans jumping up and down on Boeing going DEI? No, they're not. It's the reason they're not doing that. And so my thing is, I don't want to get into this back and forth discussion with who's a DEI hire, who's a DEI admission, especially if we don't have that on the other side. We don't say, oh, that must be a good old boy hire. Oh, Maersk, the shipping conglomerate that had all kinds of regulation violations, that had the policy that you couldn't report anything to OSHA or the Coast Guard without coming to them first. There was a reason I showed you the executive board of Maersk, the shipping conglomerate, that some Republicans wanted to find some associations with some other companies that Maersk had that said that they supported DEI. That was the reason that the Francis Scott Key Bridge is in the water right now. Not that they skirted all of these regulations, not that this board of non-DEI individuals, unless you want to talk about 3 or 4 women that were sprinkled in there, I guess you could blame it on them. But see, my point is, if you go back and look at the thumbnail of this video, I chose it on purpose. Everybody on it is a female or a person of color. Everybody has different backgrounds, from successful entrepreneurs of Godfather pizzas and big restaurant chains, to military masterminds, to attorneys, to gym owners, to bar owners. And the only thing that determines whether they are a DEI hire or not at this stage is whether or not we like them. So for this reason, it's time for DEI to go. If the Dems want to create a program or a policy or an initiative after this, which I'm not saying is not a need for, be careful with the naming. Okay, let's call it something like merit-based inclusion. Okay, let's do something like that. Merit-based inclusion. You can have that. All right. And do not alter the qualifications. Until next time, peace. Stay informed.